Hi guys, welcome to the Neuroanatomy Final Question Lecture Series. This is Rizwana Riaz, and in this presentation we're going to talk about reticular formation. I'm going to start off with its location, physiological anatomy, and it has a variety of functions, so we're going to briefly touch on some of its functions as well. Its circuitry, so we're going to talk about its afferent and efferent pathways as well. So let's start with the introduction of the reticular formation. We'll start with its location first. So basically, reticular formation is occupied in the core of the brainstem. It is present in the gray matter of the brainstem along with the nuclei for specific cranial nerves. Reticular formation is basically a diffuse group of neurons that is present within the core of the brainstem, and when you stain it with the myelin stained material, it gives quite a reticulated appearance, so hence the name. So reticular formation is phylogenetically an old system, and as we discussed earlier, it's quite poorly defined as it's basically a diffuse group of neurons located within the core of the brainstem. It has multiple synaptic connections and it receives sensory information, somatic and visceral. Those sensations are not specific but are of general awareness. It has both ascending and descending components. The ascending projections are to the thalamus, hypothalamus, and cortex, while the descending projections are to the spinal cord. So the diffuse neuronal aggregates of the entire reticular formation is arranged in three columns: the median, medial, and lateral columns. So the median column position lies next to the middle line. The nuclei of the median columns are collectively called the nuclei of Raphael, and these are serotonergic neurons. Basically, they have the unique resource of the neurotransmitter serotonin, which plays a pivotal role in the regulation of brain development and function. The medial column lies next to the median column. So as you can see in the picture, the red one presenting the median column, the blue one that is next to the median column is the medial one, and the green one is the lateral one. So the medial column nuclei are collectively made up of large cells. So going from distal to proximal, you have the gigantocellular nucleus in the medullary and the pontine part that is involved in motor coordination. You have the pontine tegmental reticular nucleus in the pontine part and the cuneiform and subcuneiform nuclei. The lateral column lies lateral to the nuclei of the medial column. The nuclei are collectively made up of small cells. Those are called parvocellular nuclei, and these control mainly the visceral functions. So, as we mentioned before, reticular formation has a multisynaptic connection and has varied function regarding that. So, some of those functions includes the cardiac centers, the respiratory centers, vasomotor centers, salivatory centers, and the chemoreceptor neurons. So, basically, in a reticular formation, it receives kind of like very general information, not the specific ones, and along with other tracks, not on its own, it provides the response as well. On itself, it's quite a general response, but to provide a specific response, it needs to interact with the other tracks as well. So moving on to the circuitry of the reticular formation. So basically in reticular pathways you have afferent connections and the efferent connections. Efferent connections of the reticular formations are divided into the descending projections and the ascending projections. Ascending projections are to the thalamus, hypothalamus, and cortex, while the descending projections are to the spinal cord. So the nuclei of the reticular formation receives information from various parts of the CNS through various tracts. These are known as afferent connection of the reticular formation. The reticular formation receives signal from the spinal cord via the spino-reticular tract and via collaterals from all ascending tracts. From the brainstem, they are collateral from the cranial nerves, including the vestibular and the cochlear nerves. From the cerebellum, there are tracts through cerebello-reticular tracts. From the basal ganglia, there are indirect and indirect tracts. From the cerebral cortex, you have the sensory motor tracts. From the limbic systems, you have tracts that includes the amygdaloid and the hippocampus that send signals to the reticular formation. The reticular formation, along with receiving information, also sends signals to various parts of the CNS. There are ascending projections and descending projections. Ascending projections are sent upwards from the brainstem up towards the diencephalon and to the cortex. That is mentioned as the thalamus, hypothalamus, subthalamus, red nucleus, and various others. And the descending projections are sent to the spinal cord. The reticular formation has two systems on the basis of functions, an ascending and a descending one. The ascending reticular formation is divided into the proximal part and the distal part. The ascending reticular formation, it brings sensory messages from the reticular formation to the brain cortex and vice versa. So basically the ascending reticular formation is regulating consciousness and arousal, like the wake up state. And while the distal part that has the vasomotor, cardiomotor, and respiratory centers, it controls the respiration rate, the cardiac rate, cardiac rhythm, cough response, and mastication. The descending reticular formation, it basically controls the muscle tone. These tracts, they are the reticulospinal tracts, and they help to modulate tone, balance, posture, and coordination of body movements, like while walking and all that. The ascending reticular formation, also which we mentioned earlier, is also known as the ascending reticular activating system because it's involved in the consciousness and arousal. It projects into the cerebral cortex in two ways, through the subthalamic nuclei and through the thalamus. It begins in the lower part of the brainstem and extends upwards through the pons, midbrain, and thalamus, and finally projects throughout the cerebral cortex. The descending reticular formation that brings messages to and from the motor neurons of the spinal cord. These are the reticular spinal tract. These tracts are the major descending pathways from the reticular formation. They're functionally divided into the descending inhibitory reticular projections and descending facilitatory reticular formation. These tracts, they act on many levels of the spinal cord to coordinate movements and autonomic functions. The reticulospinal tract, it projects to the spinal cord motor neurons, and basically, as we mentioned earlier, it helps to modulate the muscle tone, which facilitates in balance, posture, and coordinating of body movements while walking, while with the assistance of other sensory stimulus such as the visual, auditory, vestibular, and proprioceptive information. Apart from the functions of the reticular formation mentioned before, that is it plays a role in consciousness and arousal. It also plays a role in gaze through coordinated horizontal eye movements. It controls motor tones, and to name the other few, it influences endocrine secretions, role in visceral function, influences circadian rhythm, it influences the EEG in learning, it modulates afferent transmissions, and influences the autonomic nervous system. So in this slide, it's quite again repetitive of the ascending reticular activating systems, and that plays a role in the consciousness and arousal. It basically summarizes and gives experimental evidence of how in animal model, when an upper border of the spinal cord was cut, the electrical activity of the cortex showed a desynchronized pattern indicating that the animal was awake, while when we cut above the superior colliculi, the entire brainstem, the electrical activity of the cortex shows synchronized pattern indicating that the animal was in deep sleep. So the extensive lesion of the ascending reticular activating systems produce sleep. So the descending reticular activating system, it plays a major role in muscle tone, as we have mentioned earlier, and they had the facilitatory and the inhibitory reticular formation. So these two divisions, they act through the gamma motor neurons and thereby modulate the muscle tone. It maintains posture and equilibrium. The facilitatory reticular formation, it increases the muscle tone of anti-gravity muscles, while the inhibitory reticular formation, it decreases the muscle tone of of the muscles. Normally there is a balance between the activity of the facilitatory reticular formation and the inhibitory reticular formation. Moving on to the neurotransmitters of the reticular formation, you have the serotonergic neurons that we mentioned earlier that were present in the median column of the reticular formation. These project to the thalamus, cerebral cortex, hypothalamus, and limbic system. And to mention the other few, they are the large cholinergic neurons that project to cortex via thalamus. You have the small adrenergic neurons via the intralaminar nuclei of the thalamus. You have the noradrenergic neurons to the cerebellum and the dopaminergic neurons to the basal ganglia. Thank you so much for making it this far, and I hope it was quite simple. I tried to make this audio video quite small and simple, and in the PowerPoint presentation it's quite extensive and there are going to be a lot of extra slides as well, a lot more detailed. So if you want to go through that, maybe you can along with this video. I hope it was understandable, and good luck for your exams. These are some of the references, and obviously you can access YouTube and they're going to be better videos, but either ways I hope this helped. Thank you so much.